Stormwater runoff is caused by the way we use the land.
Watson Bayou is one of the largest bayous on St. Andrew Bay, and it causes us a lot of concern.
My grandfather used to fish in Watson Bayou. My concern for the northern part of Watson Bayou is how it has not been well maintained.
It has been developed for quite a long time, partly because there were so many businesses and industries associated with the bayou, so it's felt the stresses of urbanization.
We have nice homes. We have people that live on the bayou.
What we have here is typical of a lot of the shoreline development, where we have nice groomed lawns that run right down to a vertical seawall.
Fertilizers are a major problem because we use fertilizers on our yard to make our grasses grow.
While fertilizers are nutrient, it's important that we understand the process of how the fertilizer works within a waterway.
That excess nutrient that's in the water causes algae to grow.
Algal blooms as red tides are even toxic, and those things will kill off the animals, and they're certainly no friend to humans.
As soon as you walk outside, the red tide hits you, and it's a burning sensation in your throat, in your nostrils, in your eyes. It causes a lot of coughing.
Red tides may last just a few days or so, but their impacts can last a lot longer.
When we do have an algal bloom, it blocks the light from seagrasses.
Seagrass is one of the most valuable fishery habitats you can get.
The salt marshes and the seagrass are the sources of carbon energy for the entire St. Andrew Bay system.
That is the heart of your whole ecology.
The wide variety of animals that we see in the bay, a great many of them are here in the bay because they're youngsters, and they're just growing up in their nurseries, and they eventually move back offshore, so they form many of our offshore fisheries.
When they become this big, they can slide down into the seagrasses. Everything lives in the seagrasses.
The poisons that come from the runoff of water does great damage to the microorganisms that feed each stage up through the larval stage of the fish.
You're not going to kill off the big fish necessarily. You're going to kill off where he came from.
We've unfortunately lost a lot of seagrass in the last 20, 30 years.
The biggest single incident that has damaged the natural seagrass beds here in St. Andrew Bay happened many years ago, when a very well-intentioned but ill-informed shrimp farming operation caused the loss of over 1,000 acres of seagrasses in southern West Bay.
They treated these nets with organotin and copper. That has a terrible effect on your seagrasses. When they closed it down, they left the 50-gallon drums of this material sitting on the shoreline.
It rained and washed huge amounts of that anti-fouling compound, which contained a lot of copper, into the bay. That was 10% of the seagrass beds in the St. Andrew Bay system, and that loss continues.
But we have something else going on that's impeding the regrowth of that grass. They call it turbidity. That's a nice term for stirred up bottom. Untreated stormwater, it's carrying sediments with it, dirt, goo. And as it gets into the bay system where it kind of slows down, it piles up. It becomes like a goo bottom. As time goes by with wind, tides, and more stormwater coming, it kind of spreads the goo out.
The process is very similar to the soils that are carried by a river and form a river delta, except that that wasn't the natural situation at the heads of our bayous. Our drainage systems are designed to have concentrated it into certain localized areas.
There's getting to be more infiltration, sandbars. Our bayous are closing up, and there's not the flushing in some of the heads of those bayous.
And that's a stormwater problem. Martin Lake wasn't always a freshwater lake. It used to be Martin Bayou. But in the mid-1950s, a dam was constructed to isolate the lake from the bay. All of the animals that were marine animals finally were gone.
I sadly have to say that I've seen it starting to degrade.
A lot of people have moved into that area and live around it. And we simply haven't kept our stormwater management system up to the task of that kind of growth.
You have massive amounts of stormwater. Along with it will come all the goodies that we put into it. And it finally winds up in the Martin Lake with thick sediments on the bottom.
Not only can pollutants enter Martin Lake, but those that can dissolve in the water, like fertilizers, can go right over the dam and into St. Andrew Bay. If we let the bay become unhealthy, we lose all of those natural resources that are terrifically important to our local economy.
We have an awful lot of oysters in the bay, but most of those are in areas that can't be harvested because they're high bacteria counts.
The reason you can't harvest oysters in St. Andrew Bay is usually the stormwater problem. Bacteria associated with animal waste or garbage or anything on the land can be carried by stormwater into the bay and concentrated in the tissues of the oysters because oysters are filter feeders. And once those concentrations of bacteria build up in the oysters, you can't eat those oysters.
Parker, our city, was founded upon bringing in the mullet, bringing in the redfish, the crabs, the scallops. That's how people survived in Parker.
Our scallop population crashed several years ago.
Over the past 15 years, the scallops, maybe one I have found.
We look at scallops as a way of judging the health of St. Andrew Bay, as a canary in the mine, if you will. And when we lost our scallop population, that set up a real big red flag.
Water quality was the only thing that you need for scallops. The scallop fishery would be flourishing if they had water quality.
And that depends on us having a really good stormwater management program.
If we collectively do nothing and allow the bay to continue to degrade, the economic viability will be destroyed.
It wasn't long ago that one of the travel magazines identified Panama City Beach as one of the top 10 beaches in the world. It's because of our pristine white sands and beautiful blue-green waters. It will not be that way if we do not preserve the quality of the water in our bays, because the water flows directly out of the bay, goes west right along those beaches, and it would be detrimental to the community, to our tourism economy, if we don't preserve that quality of water.
It's one of the most important resources we have in our economy. It supports all of the other economies in one fashion or another.
Stormwater will become a greater problem in the future if we don't address it, simply because we're going to have more urbanization, more growth.
Had we maybe done a 40-year bond, or had we done a stormwater user fee in 1995, we could have corrected all of our stormwater problems for $3 million. And we did not do that because $3 million was a lot of money.
It won't get any less expensive, it will only get more expensive. We need to address stormwater today.
The citizens in Bay County have a capacity to understand this and to want to contribute to a collective process of improving the quality of our bays.
Particularly in this situation, if it is explained to the people and they become a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, then they're going to realize what it's going to take to put this measure in place.
I've learned so much in the last year and a half that I've been involved. I started as a volunteer with BEST, which actually led to my becoming a project manager through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We did an entire inventory of all the wildlife out on West Bay, the Warren Bayou impoundments. And eventually, we'd like to be able to restore some of the seagrasses that were lost back in the time of the shrimp farming efforts out there. BEST and Gulf Power did a cleanup, and between about 25 of us, we were able, in less than 5 hours, gather more than 2,000 pounds of garbage. In spite of it looking good on the surface, the sheer fact that we were able to get so much in so little time shows what needs to be done, and shows what we can do in other areas of the bay.
Not leaving debris along the waterway is critical. The derelict boats, it's important that if the boat is not operational, remove the boat from the water. And instead of throwing an automobile tire into the water, call us. I'm with the CRA, I'll help you remove that. So it's important that we as a community join together.